Right, thank you for joining us for tonight's para board meeting. It is June 17th, 2020. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have a roll call, please.
Chairman Figueroa. Chairman Figueroa.
Here.
Mr. Rankin.
Here.
Ms. Heidele. Present. Mr. Cohen.
Here.
Mr. Rita.
Here.
Ms. Dye.
Here.
Mr. Fontaine. Mr. Fontaine is absent. Ms. Swearingen.
Here.
Ms. Ray.
Here.
You have 8 present and 1 absent. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, Jennifer. Much appreciated. Can we get the agenda up on the screen?
Oh, God.
The agenda on the screen?
Yeah, to share, yes.
I can do that real quick if
You
you
will
like.
read it into the agenda.
Please, I just want to make sure that members of the public are able to see it.
Okay. I can share the quickest I can share is the web version because I actually have it up. And if you'd like me to share the PDF version, then I can do that too.
Yeah, thank you.
Or actually, that's probably better. Hold on, let me do that. Apologies. Here it comes.
No worries. Great, perfect. All right, so we have quorum. Our meeting is commencing. We have our biannual report that's going to be presented tonight, along with invitation for public comment, and then we'll head into executive session after that. Before we head into our annual report, I would just like to say a few words. Obviously, we've all been paying attention to what's been happening nationally between law enforcement and civilians. And, you know, I'm sure my board members, along with myself, share a concern about what is happening to individuals. And, you know, I certainly feel like there is an opportunity here to create some new structures for law enforcement to operate with. Obviously, as a para board, we're essentially reacting to complaints that are filed with our board. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that as individuals we can express, you know, the need for changes within the way that policing is done in this country as a whole. So I'm looking forward to the public discussion because I think the sentiment is the same. And also looking forward to hearing from our executive director, who's been working diligently around this topic, not only the report, but also around police reform, et cetera. and our investigator, Mr. Eugene Montero, has been doing some great work for us, investigating the cases that we do have before us. I know that we've been in operation for a couple years now, and we're steadily pushing towards creating results for our communities, for the complaints that do come into to PERA, and we hope that we can expedite and push on that to get faster results for those individuals that are filing complaints. So with that said, I will turn it over to Jose Baptista for his overview and comments.
I just got a text message from Michael, and he says he's having a hard time signing on, so I'm just responding to him really quickly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to, Sean, would it be okay if I shared my screen too at some point? Am I allowed to do that?
Sure, that's fine. For a member of the body, we generally just caution people because we don't want you to accidentally share your bank statement or something that you might have had open on your computer. But yes, let me see if I can make sure that you should be able to do that. And also, everybody else can mute in the lower left-hand corner, or if I detect noise, sometimes I might mute you, so don't take any offense of that. You can always unmute yourself whenever you need to speak if there's a background noise coming from a particular phone. Jose, let me know if you have any trouble sharing your screen.
No, first I want to just say a couple quick words similar to Nick, and then I'll share my screen. I want to strike a balance between covering the biennial report with the attention it deserves, but also leaving space for the public to comment, which PERA was very intentional about creating that space and reaching out to folks, because the reality is that there's a lot of dialogue. First of all, there's a lot of dialogue going on. I think my sense is that there's a hunger to have even more dialogue, which we saw with a really long meeting last night and just around the country. And, on the one hand, we're dealing with the context of tragedy, but on the other hand, the interest in civilian oversight, I would say, I think it's safe to say, has spiked. And so we want to make sure we're doing our job to reach out to the public. We've created a Twitter account, PERA Providence, one word together. You can be in touch with us. And I'm actually trying to keep track of anybody making comments to us right now. So with that being said, I just want to iterate that more than any particular policy, more than any particular debate, we are a board that's here to serve the public, and we welcome that opportunity to do so. So I'm going to share my screen quickly, and I'm going to try to go through the report quickly, just because I know I can kind of get stuck on something. And so if I do, or if anybody has any questions, please flag them or hold them until we get to the end, and then we are happy to take all the questions in the world once we get through. Let me share my screen here. Okay. All right. Does everybody see that? Okay. So I'll just say I'll say a little bit about the biennial report under the PCPRA. Actually, strike that. Not the PCPRA. The PERA statute, which is a separate statute, right? The PERA statute is 18.5-2 of the City Code of Ordinance. I think the PCPRA is 18.5/4. Under the PERA statute, we're required to make biennial reports. I estimate that to be every 6 months. Our first biennial report was in October. That annual report is on our website. And so I welcome folks to check it out, read it, and that, we do the best we can to summarize all the work we've been doing in that report. And so this is our second biennial report. What the statute requires us to do is to simply provide a summary. You'll see that the report is addressed to the mayor and the city council president. That's what's required. We report a summary of our activities. What have we been doing? What have we been spending money on? Et cetera, et cetera. In this report, we are adding two notable parts that I suspect will take most of our conversation today. Number one is, in November, we actually had the PERA board at one of our board meetings. We had a presentation where a man named Kenneth Marone came to the para board meeting and presented academic research from Central Connecticut State University. This was pursuant to the statewide racial profiling bill. There was a study done of all traffic stops in Rhode Island in the year 2016. So this data is 4 years old, which on the one hand is a long time ago, but on the other hand, is fairly recent. So this study that I'm going to share with you that we're going to publish on our website, that's what it is, right? From Central Connecticut State University, hired to analyze the traffic stops in Rhode Island for an entire year, January 1, 2016 to December 31, 2016. So we'll get into the details of that report. I was in touch with the city. I don't think the materials have been published at this moment, but this report and the studies we're referring to will be published on our website. And then second, we wanted to address the issues that are taking place right now in our society. I think that the events in Minneapolis and across the world have really caused us to think a little bit more critically about police reform. And I think a challenge for us and myself personally has been, how do we talk about police reform in a way that does not sound anti-police or anything like that? Not that, right? That's been something that we've been trying to prove, right? It's possible to look at policies, to look at practices, to look at the results in an independent and objective way that produces better public policy. And that's really been the goal of PARA. And so to that end, we have 9 specific proposals that we're making to the city council and mayor. And this report has been sent to each of their offices. I've expressed an interest in meeting with each of those offices, because we're not just making recommendations to throw into the wind. We're making recommendations that we've thought a lot about, that are being implemented across the country, and that will shed sunlight on some of the practices we have here in Rhode Island, Providence, and ultimately produce better results. So this is the cover page, and that's a little bit of an outline of what we have. The second page is the table of contents. We broke this down pretty simply. First category is what have we been doing since the last report in October, the status of the complaints we received that I'll get into. A particular issue that we looked into recently was, as I'm sure many of you know, I think I saw Julia on the call, Operation Bust Out, which was, I'll get into a little bit more. It was an operation conducted by the Providence Police, which drew concern from the public, and PARA, as the oversight board, is looking into that matter. The last portion here before the appendix is our recommendations, which I'll get into, and then the appendix will be the actual Central Connecticut State University report, which again will be public on our website. I'm not going to go through it here. I think it's like 200 pages, so I'm going to settle on these 9 pages for now. Okay. Next page. Oh. What am I doing here? Okay, here we go. All right, Central Connecticut State University, right? So like I said, I don't mean to breeze through this, but I'm going to go through the outline. That's what I just explained to you all what what this research is about. And so I outline a little bit about that in the report here. Really, the report asks 2 different questions, right? Do racial and ethnic disparities exist in traffic stop data? And what are the factors that contribute to that? You'll see Kenneth's presentation was rather extensive. I think he spoke for like probably over an hour. And that goes to show just how intensive their research was, right? This is not something that was a conclusion. This wasn't something that was rushed. This wasn't something, this is really high quality work. And this is the sort of work that we want to focus on PARA. And maybe one day have the appropriate funding and resources to be able to do this work on our own, right? Conduct this sort of analysis. You'll see that, again, this is only 1 year, 2016. We'd be curious to see what happened in 2017, 2018, 2019, et cetera. I highlighted 4 bullet points here, right? I think the study, I think in Rhode Island that year, 2016, there was something like 240,000 traffic stops. At least that's what was studied in the report. In Providence, you see here, there was about closer to 10,000. And I'm sharing here 4 different findings. I got to move the kind of faces here because it's getting in the way of my seeing it. I shared here 4 different findings that I pulled out of the report. I would suggest folks look at the report, read through the report. I think it's very, like I said, comprehensive. But in terms of whether we found racial profiling or not, you'll see that at the end of the report, they say that it would be helpful to have more information, but based on what we had in 1 year, these are some of the findings, right? So in Providence, between the dates January 1, 2016 and December 31, 2016, we found that Black drivers in Providence were stopped in greater proportion to the localized residential population of Black residents. So that means, and the city is divided into 9 districts for police precincts. And no matter what proportion of Black people live in each of those districts, the proportion of Black people that are stopped is greater than that, right? So that's a notable piece of information in terms of trying to determine whether racial profiling exists in these traffic stops. Number 2, 52% of all equipment and inspection-related traffic stops took place in 3 patrol districts with the highest concentration of people of color. Compare that to in neighborhoods and traditionally where white drivers are, they are more likely to be stopped for more substantive reasons like hazardous driving, right? So this is the what we see, the turn signal you didn't use is broken, the tail light. A big concern for me as an attorney, especially as a defense attorney, was, one of the critical points in any analysis is, why did this stop take place? And unfortunately, you see in too many cases, like for example, Sandra Bland, a simple traffic stop will turn into a full-blown situation that sometimes becomes lethal, right? And so in order to, that might be point Z that we want to avoid, but in order to avoid getting there, this report helps us kind of look at point A, right? Why is it that we're finding in communities where people of color live more predominantly, that we're seeing increased stops for equipment and inspection related reasons, right? So that's an interesting piece of information. Number 3, in 2016, 587 out of 9,787 traffic stops conducted resulted in an arrest of either the driver or passenger. This is 2 times the state average, right? So that begs the question, why are we arresting people twice as often as the state is for similar reasons? Okay, I need to get my kind of thing up. Okay, so and then this is the next page. I think it's kind of 2 pages in one. That's why I keep getting confused. The last piece of information that I pulled out there was that non-white drivers were almost twice as likely to be arrested as a result of a traffic stop when compared to white drivers, right? And so when we're sitting down with the police department, when we're talking about racial injustice, when we're talking about social injustice, when we talk about systemic injustice, the first piece of it is to acknowledge it, to understand it, right? We don't have to get into, or at least I personally am not suggesting getting into name calling and negativity and things like that, not blaming anybody for doing that. But the point that we're trying to make at PARA is that we're an independent body that is dedicated to doing this work impartially, and this impartial evidence gives us a framework to work through. So that was information that is available to us. We will be following up on this and seeing, like I said, how can PARA be involved in not only finding more of this research, but helping to either fund it or create it, right? So that's a big topic. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that. I'll go through the rest of it quickly, and unfortunately, there's a little part that's blacked out. This is not on purpose. I'll try to fix that. But this was basically our budget request for 2020-2021 for the next year. Our budget right now is $350,000, $350,000. What we asked for 2021 was essentially to double that budget. At the time, my impression was that we were asking for about 1% of what the police budget was, although I think it was a little bit more than that. As of the publishing of this report, the recommended allocation, both in the mayor's budget and what we see in the city council, is just about 583. And so when folks ask, what is PARA doing and how are they doing it, a big part of what we do is personnel and manpower, and obviously the budget funds that. And so our thinking is, if we can increase our budget, we can not only increase personnel, but we can increase technology. I know we've been working on getting a database to help us collect information and conduct our investigations. We can invest in a strategic plan, which is something we're working on as well. And so in terms of, we've dedicated a couple of discussions at our board meetings to this budget, which helps us inform the work for next year. And so it's a little bit about our thinking to that end. And I think that basically says everything I was just telling you folks. And just for context, if the Providence Police budget is $85 million, initially we had been asking for 1%. One of our recommendations is to make sure that our funding may or may not be literally tied to the police department budget, but I think that it should absolutely be compared, right? And if we are somewhere like 0.5% of the budget, I think that's important to know and to fix. And so we are recommending that the city fund us at least 2% of the Providence Police budget. And this year, that would be 1.7 million, which would obviously a drastic change. But put it like this: the needs for para were pretty big before George Floyd in Minneapolis and everything else. I think that the needs of para are going to be even greater now. I think now that our work is a little bit better understood and appreciated, we're going to have to revisit this. And so funding is a big part of what we're working on. And as I said, this is what the funding can do, right? $25,000 for a strategic plan, help us incorporate comment from the community, actually have a plan for 3 to 5 years out, as opposed to piecemealing it and other similar programs, right? Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next section here. Status of complaint. So this is a big item for para. Para, under the para statute, you'll see that para really has 3, maybe 4 main functions. Number 1 is to receive complaints of misconduct, obviously, which probably gets the most attention. Number 2 is related, review and recommend changes to the policies and procedures of the police department. While something like reviewing complaints probably gets a lot of the attention for reasons that, complaints kind of give us some insight as to what's going on. I personally have been trying to invest more time and attention in policy review because I think that while complaints help us identify a problem, reforming policies help us fix the problem. And so that's another part. Sorry, I wanted to let that motorbike go by. Sorry about that. The third job that para has is community outreach, which we've engaged, obviously, before the coronavirus. We were doing a little bit better job at going to local schools, organizations, meeting with people, community leaders, and making sure that people know about our program. So let's talk a little bit about complaints. para received its first complaint in April 2019. Just for context, para was impaneled in April 2018. I was hired in March 2019. We received our first complaint in April 2019. The reality is that, and I've said this openly, and I don't have any shame in saying it, para at that point was really not prepared to take complaints. We did not want to turn the public away because that's not what we do. But at the same time, we did not have an infrastructure to take complaints. As I detail here in this report, investigating the police department is a really serious thing to do, right? You're talking about high stakes things. And what we're learning is, some of this I agree with, and some of this I think is excessive. There's a whole host of, you were hearing about the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights, which does not necessarily apply to para, right? The Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights is something that implies to investigations and discipline handed down by the own police department, right? So if the outside agency, like on the high end, the federal government and the Department of Justice, or on a more local end, para, if either one of those ends are conducting an investigation, something like the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights does not apply. Nevertheless, we have found difficulty in trying to penetrate that model, if you will, right? Even though the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to us, it is often used as a impediment to helping us do our investigations. So the bottom line is we've received a total of 30 complaints between April 2019 and now. And on the screen, you'll see the breakdown. This is the votes that the para board has taken. We have referred 12 of those cases to investigation. We referred 5 of those cases to mediation. We've dismissed 9, and we've held 3. When we hold the cases because there's another criminal case going on, a federal lawsuit going on, something that gets in the way of us dealing with it. And so that's why we hold the cases, right? We've held a bunch of meetings with the police department. From those meetings have been born other meetings, right? para has brought on a mediator and investigator who I believe are both on this phone call and are extraordinary professionals who do their job very well. We have taken time to introduce those folks to the community, to the police department, to the union. And so on the one hand, it is frustrating for the para board to be able to say at this point in June 2020 that we have not yet begun to conduct those investigations. On the other hand, when you take into account the reason why, what we've been trying to do, and then with the fact that this pleasant coincidence that just as we were wrapping up on March 9, 2020, and we had a final meeting with the FOP, the police union, and we felt like we were really going to begin coronavirus work. And we've been now trying to do that from from a virtual sense. So, and I want to speak a little bit about the complaints we've received, right? I think on the next page here. Here's a little bit more details about the complaints, right? So, of the 12 complaints referred to investigation, 6 of those complaints involve allegations of warrantless searches that could be of your home, of your car. 3 of those complaints involve allegations of excessive force, and 2 involve allegations of harassment, right? That could be somebody who's excessive or disrespectful. Of the 5 complaints referred to mediation, these were all incidents that involve some form of spectrum of a rude or discourteous police officer. I know one of those complaints was a pretty involved complaint that lasted a while, and others of those complaints are really quick incidents like that. But ultimately, mediation is, again, something that I want to highlight because it's something that I feel enthusiastic about, right? Again, perhaps the investigation is something that gets all the attention because of how high profile it can be. But in my personal opinion, again, as an attorney, as somebody who's lived in South Providence my entire life, I'm finding that people want to have a conversation, right? There's case law that says that, you know, civilians are not supposed to fight with police on the scene, right? You're not supposed to resist an arrest, even if you think it's illegal, which in my opinion is a scary thought. So you're supposed to comply on the scene. Something that I think PARA does through mediation is provide an avenue through which, okay, let's say I get arrested and I feel I shouldn't have been. Maybe on the scene I can't say too much or resist too much or fight too much. But at a mediation hosted by PARA, the idea is to equal the footing, if you will, the power spectrum, and allow the complainant to have an opportunity to have a mediation involving the police officer. The goal of a mediation is to reach an agreement at the end, some sort of understanding between the parties as to what went wrong, what could have gone better. And really, once we build that up and are doing that, build a system to do that, I personally believe that's going to help us resolve and shed light on a lot of the issues and disagreements that exist between the community and the police department, right? And it's not gonna be a silver bullet. It's not gonna solve every problem, but in my experience, having represented thousands of people as a public defender, having had at least a couple dozen complaints here, there's a lot of cases where a little bit of conversation can go a long way, and in some cases can prevent something really tragic from happening. So that's our status now. I feel a little bit better about investigations because PARA has begun to conduct 2 investigations on our own accord. Under the PARA statute, I think I cited it up here, subsection H1 and H2 of the PARA statute, PARA can designate an independent monitor to go check out what the Providence Police is doing with regard to an investigation. So in the Sergeant Hanley case, where we learned through a news article that a Providence police officer was accused of punching a man that was already handcuffed, and there were charges pressed against them, that was something really serious, right? So PARA is in the process of conducting an internal review of that investigation. So again, although it's taken a bit of time to get here, we have at least begun to investigate those 2 cases. And from that, we'll begin to investigate the cases that we've actually received complaints on. The mediation is a little bit different. We have been in conversation with the police department about conducting virtual mediations. I have not heard back on a particular proposal that we made, but we are looking forward to doing that, right? So that's a little bit of let me take that back. That's a little bit about not just what's in front of us, but also what is our goal, right? What are we trying to do? What is the purpose of doing an investigation? What is the purpose of doing a mediation? Some people will highlight the fact that PARA does not have the power to, for example, we conduct an investigation, and what we can do at the end of that is make recommendations to the city. If we find that something bad happened or something wrong happened or there's some sort of policy that doesn't work, at the end of the day, what we can do is recommend. We cannot enforce, unfortunately. And my sense is that that is something that is mostly true for most of the 200 boards, 200 plus civilian overview boards that exist in the country. Fortunately, we have a city council that's pretty progressive, that's pretty committed to social justice, that is a partner with PARA. And so in the event that there were a recommendation that we were making that we can't enforce, my answer is always, well, we can work with the city council, right? If we needed information, we can ask for a subpoena through the city council. We could ask that, they implement changes to policies, ordinances. And so part of our strategy is to use the tools that we have rather than focus on the tools that we don't have, right? That's a little bit about that. Now the next section here. Operation Bust Out. And so this is section 3 of the report, almost getting to the end here. In early March 2020, Para became aware of an article published in The Appeal discussing recent operation of Providence Police Department. So this was an article that informed the public about Operation Bust Out. The allegations are that the police had been receiving complaints about drug dealing in Kennedy Plaza. And as far as I understand what's happening, and I don't want to misrepresent anything, what happened was, at least according to the article, right, undercover police officers were making pretend that they were feeling withdrawal symptoms, that they were addicted to drugs and feeling withdrawal. And so they would go up to folks that they thought were drug dealing or were told were drug dealing and ask them for films of Suboxone for $5 a piece. And when the subject would give the Suboxone, they would, eventually that would lead an arrest. There were a couple of concerning things. I think a lot of this happened around Christmas time, and folks were rounded up and arrested and held without bail at a time where I think we should have been a little bit more conscious of what time it was. And two, I think there's a host of interesting questions that take place there around policy, right? Some of the questions that Para asked, because once we read the article, we followed up with the police department and asked, right? We did have a couple of conversations with the police department. When there was a Para meeting scheduled for March, the Providence Police Department had agreed to send somebody to our meeting to address this with the board. Obviously, that meeting was canceled due to coronavirus, and we have not picked up that conversation yet. But that is absolutely something we are looking at. And that is the sort of case that we want to look at, right? It's not just about the complaints they receive, but think of it as patterns and practices, right? When we read an article like this, we want to ask what's going on. And if we find out that there's something that's counter to public health or public policy, then that's something that Para can look into and make recommendations for change. So I did want to inform the public that as of this moment, we are still having dialogue about that case and still looking to look into it. Okay, so this is the final page of the report. And again, one last time, this report is going to be published on our website. Let me just take this quick commercial break to see if there's any comments on our Para account. Ooh, 20, oh boy. I think that's because PVD CSA is live tweeting us. Okay. All right. I don't think I see any questions there, but if anybody does have any questions, please send them to us. Okay, so here's the last part, right? We have been doing lots of thinking, lots of talking. I really want to thank my board members. I want to thank Eugene Montero, my investigator. I want to thank Sheila Hubbard, our mediator, just because, in all honesty, this has been a really difficult time. For us as people, for us as human beings, for us as people of color, it's just difficult, right? To deal with the videos that we've been watching on the internet, to deal with the issues taking place around the country. It is really, really serious out there. And although Para was already impaneled and very seriously engaging in this work, as you can see, I feel like everything that's happened in the past couple of weeks has really forced us to double down and make this even make even more effort and more ideas and do more to fix these problems before they bubble up to the surface and result in tragedies as we've seen. So here are 9 specific recommendations. As most of you probably know, Para has already made 1 recommendation to the city with regard to the reallocations of funds from the Providence Police budget. My feeling is that oversight should be a civilian-led function. At the moment, we have experienced several frustrations in that the Internal Affairs Bureau has essentially exclusive jurisdiction over complaints, right? A lot of our conversation and why it's taken us months to get to this point is because every time Para wants to look into a case, we're told that it has to be through the Internal Affairs Bureau. And it's been kind of complicated trying to figure out how we can fulfill our mission, which is to be independent and impartial, while at the same time getting entangled in things like the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights, which in my opinion has nothing to do with us. So these recommendations are meant to address some of those issues, right? So without further ado, let me read them. The first 5, you'll see noticed the same way. We're asking, respectfully submitting to the mayor and city council to endorse, right, to support us, an official, independent, and civilian review, right? Official, independent, civilian review. And it's not me, Jose Batista, who's going to do it, for everybody who's concerned about my doing these reports, which people have expressed, but it's going to be the remarkably qualified and professional Eugene Montero, who is our investigator, who has experience investigating cases in the military, in the private sector, somebody who has lifelong relationships based on trust in both the police department and the community, and who has the just a stellar reputation of somebody who is perfectly not only qualified, but situated to do this work, right? So in the event that these reviews take place, the person that will be leading them at this moment will be Mr. Montero. But we want to do an official, independent, and civilian review of the force procedure, right? What does it mean to use force? I'll give you an example. When I started law school, I would I would hear, I would listen to people talk in class about police brutality. And I understood the general concept of what police brutality was, or at least what the accusations were, but I was not, you know, I'm being honest, I was 23 years old, somebody born and raised in Southside Providence, but I was not really understanding of the idea of what police brutality was. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that force is it may be a 5-letter word, but it is a gigantic word in terms of police policy, right? The bottom line that we want to ask is when, where, how, and why is a police officer allowed to put their hand on somebody? For example, if there's an active shooter, I suspect police are going to try to use force to stop that person, right? Because it's deadly force. Whereas if you have a traffic stop, you're probably going to be a lot less likely to use force there. And so I think that the city, really as a whole, in a perfect situation, we would just have a mass conversation about this. But at least to begin that, we need to do a civilian review of what the use of force procedures actually are. And I mean from the bottom up, because I have sat in conversations with police officers, both in Providence and not. And we've reviewed evidence or videos, and I'll be told, oh, you know, this is a use of force and that's proper. This is a use of force and that's proper. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what that is, but it does not look proper. And so that's what we need to look at. Number two, there is a particular unit in the police department known as the Violent Crimes Task Force. We have engaged with the police department in conversation about this unit. The concerns are that in trying to prevent Violent Crimes Task Force, sometimes the rules and the policies that other police officers are following may not be followed as closely to the law. I suspect members of the Providence Police Department will object to that representation. However, that's why that difference of opinion that we have about the work that we do is exactly why we need to have a civilian review of what exactly is taking place with the Violent Crimes Task Force. And again, remember that all of these 9 recommendations are meant to not necessarily resolve social justice, because I don't think we're going to achieve social justice in a week, let alone with 9 ideas that came out of the para board, but to really begin to improve the conditions we're living in Rhode Island, right? We're lucky that we haven't had any of these tragedies in Providence, but we also don't want to wait until something like that happens. And when you have the allegations that we've heard recently with a man losing his eye with a projectile and a man being punched when he's handcuffed, those things sound a little bit too close to those tragic situations that we've seen around the country. And we want to try to kind of bring the oar back to the other side, if you will, to prevent it from going further. Military equipment is something we're very concerned about. The United States of America spends about more than the next 25 countries combined in terms of military spending, and we're finding that a lot of that military equipment is trickling down to our local police departments, and so that is something of a pretty serious concern. So we would like to review what military equipment we have, right? The fourth is the training academy. There have been recent statements made by the police department in terms of what they get trained to do and not do. That is something else that I think needs to be reviewed by civilians. The disciplinary matrix, how, when, why, where, etc., are police punished? What do they, leadership, police command staff, take into account when they're punishing a police officer? Those are some things that we need to know. So those are the first 5, and you'll see they're very similar, 5 different topics. Number 6, again, the point that we were making is that oversight, in order to be effective, more effective, should be led by civilians, right? It should not be us asking or trying to get what's left over after the police department has done what it needs to do. It needs to be civilians leading that conversation. To that end, at this moment and for the past year and a half, Para does not know what complaints are taking place at the Internal Affairs Bureau. First and foremost, let me say that I have a great relationship with Major Oscar Perez. He's somebody that I appreciate and has treated me personally with the utmost respect and courtesy. And so nothing that I'm saying is a reflection of him, but rather as a department between Para representing civilian oversight and the Internal Affairs Bureau representing police conducting their own oversight. I think we need to shift away from that model. And in order to shift away from that model, it makes sense to reallocate whatever funding we're using, which to me, I haven't been able to find as of this time. I know that the police budget is, I think WPRI has been doing some great reporting on this in terms of where the police budget goes. I think something like 90% of it goes to personnel and benefits. I haven't found how much of that goes to the Internal Affairs Bureau, but basically we need to start thinking about how are we going to start to shift the responsibilities, the assets, the opportunities and training from that department and the appropriate funding to the parent board, right? So that is number 6. Number 7, I'm asking the mayor and city council to vocally support the reforming of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. I will note that I am not calling for the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. I think that I have been misquoted and misrepresented in the past, and so I want to clarify that. We're simply talking about reforming. And I think that's a conversation for another day. I am happy to share that Para has been given a seat on the commission that Senator Metz is proposing to the state. I know that that's going to be a whole conversation, and I know folks have different opinions about that, but to the extent that Para can participate in this conversation, I think that's a really good idea. Number 8, there are various police departments, cities across the country that have, in response to Minneapolis, codified an ordinance known as duty to intervene. In the George Floyd case, you saw that there were 4 police officers involved in that case, unfortunately, 1 who actually committed the act and 3 who stood around with their hands in their pockets. That is not okay, obviously. And so we want to codify an ordinance, not a policy, not a recommendation, an ordinance in the city of Providence that says that any Providence police officer who witnesses excessive force or serious misconduct, you have a responsibility to do something. I mean, we are not responsible for what happened in Minneapolis, but if anybody pushes back against that idea, my response is to say, anybody watches that video and understands that this man was pinned to the ground for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the latter part of which he was unconscious, and still police officers on top of him, and nobody stopped to intervene. I think that a message needs to be sent across the country, and that sort of ordinance will go a long way to do that. Finally, I kind of put a 3 for 1 in there, if you will, just because I was running out of space on the page. And 12 doesn't sound as good as 9, but the PCPRA, that is the statute that governs a lot of what we're talking about here. It was originally called the Community Safety Act. It has maintained that identity, and I think that the city owes the community a solid, if you will, and we need to go back to that name. Some of the criticism against that name was that it was somehow audacious for the community to imply that it needed to be kept safe. I don't think that seems so audacious anymore. And so I think representation matters, intent matters, and whatever happened before the original passing of this bill is no longer relevant in this day and age. And we need to make sure that our actions, that our words and deeds are matching what we say is important to us. Number 2, as I mentioned before, Para cannot enforce the recommendations that we are making. And so I'm asking the city council to amend the PCPRA so that we can. For example, we need to, at this moment, if we wanted to subpoena documents from the Providence Police Department, we would need to ask the city council to do it. In order for us to do our work seriously, we shouldn't have to ask the city council to do it. We should be able to do it ourselves and to be able to conduct investigations properly. And finally, as I mentioned before, codify a minimum annual budget of not less than 2% of the Providence Police budget. So I took a lot longer than I wanted to take there, but I just wanted to make sure that the public knows as much about what we're doing as possible. And so I am gonna be quiet unless folks have questions, at least for me in particular.
All right, so we'll open it up to questions from the board.
Hey, this is Mike Fontaine. I might have forgotten to or overlooked this, but I can't see what number it was, but we're talking about materials and including training academy. I just think it's important to point out in-service trainings as well, which is, of course, the trainings that they get on a regular basis, or hopefully on a regular basis from the department itself. So it's probably good to mention that.
That's a great idea, Michael. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Jose, this is Elise. I just want to go ahead and show my support the fact that we refer back to the PCRA as the CSA, because that representation is very important. And if the community is going to be behind it, because they're the folks that built it, they need to be able to really push that as far as messaging. I mean, while I have the floor, why not, right? So the Human Relations Commission, when I was with the city of Providence, I was the executive director of the Human Relations Commission, and they got notice of every complaint that went into IAB that was going to hearing as notification. And so I'm assuming that PARA does not have that same notification process. It's just like a blind CC of this hearing that's taking place. So I know that the system is already built in order to notify us. I know it's when it goes to hearing, it's not when the original complaint is made, because as you know, there's different, sometimes we get the wrong phone number or wrong call for folks looking for something from PARA that should be something else. And so, but it's once it is directed to go to hearing, there is a situation where the Human Relations Commission, as well as a number of other city departments, are notified.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that. I think I agree with you. I mean, it's going to multiply our work, by a lot, but, hopefully we're given the funding we need to do that work.
I think that it's important that we are notified of that, because it just builds a transparent relationship between the police department, but also the community, knowing that we are in fact working on behalf of like that unbiased piece. And so it's just, or at least the attempt to be unbiased in this regard. And by notifying both of us, just like it could be a two-way street if we were all playing ball in the same game, if you will. I think that there's an opportunity there to work collectively and to ensure that there's transparency, because it's a level of checks and balances. Like there's the reason we need IAB is not because everyone's against the police department, even internally. It's the fact that there's a level of checks and balances there to ensure that there's transparency and there's recourse for inaction or the wrong kind of action taken. And so I just find it very important.
Jose, a question. You delivered this to both City Council and the Mayor's office. What has the response been thus far?
What's up? One more time?
Yep. So you've delivered the biannual report to City Council and the Mayor's office. What has the response been so far? Is it favorable, or are there questions? What?
Well, I'll tell you this: the report that this report that I sent to them, I did send to them maybe 3 hours-ish before this meeting, and so we didn't really get into the chance to discuss it. I will say though that when I sent out the statement recommending that the city reallocate funds from the IAB to Providence Police Department, I did send that to both the City Council and the Mayor's office. I did hear from the Mayor's office, and they were receptive to my statement and said that there would be some follow-up with the person from their policy office. And to this date, that conversation hasn't happened yet, but I am looking forward to having it.
Thank you, Jose. I think regardless of what.
I just want to say something. I still feel that a duty to intervene without a mandate of use of body cam footage or use of body cameras in any and all enforcement activities will kind of make it your word versus my word, so to speak. So we don't have a mandate for the use of body cams. We can't have a situation where something takes place, the situation begins to escalate, cameras go off, someone's on the ground bleeding, cameras come back on. So without there being a mandate for the cameras to be on from the onset of voices getting raised or from the exiting of a cruiser, it makes it kind of difficult to lay the responsibility of accountability strictly in the hands or in the purview of the officer on the street. And I still believe that there needs to be accountability for review of those tapes within the command structure, being sergeants, lieutenants, district commanders, and things like that. So I still believe that there's a lot of gaps in this, and it sounds really nice, and we can do a lot of reviews and, you know, maybe another blue ribbon panel or something like that. But if these steps aren't made concrete, it's just going to be another long, drawn out process to bring us right back to where we were.
I agree with you, Marchese. I think also there needs to be more accountability also when they don't turn it on, you know. I mean, why should they have to tap it on? It should be automatic. And once they leave it should be automatic. I think a review needs to be done on the body cams. You know how many times we've had, every time we've had a complaint, we ask, you know, has a body cam been turned on? And, you know, how many times have we heard, like, say 10 out of, 2 out of 10, the body cams are on. So there needs to be more accountability. I think the city, something has to be done. A study has to be done. I mean, this is just, it's ridiculous.
You know, if I could, I'll just chime in and say I agree wholeheartedly with both of them. I'm sorry, I signed in a little late, so I don't know if this was a topic of conversation earlier. But, you know, for these body cams to be switched on and off and stuff like that, and even have them have the ability to, I think it's ridiculous. You know, turn it off so you can write in whatever you're claiming happened. I really do think, and again, agree wholeheartedly that there should be strict. I mean, that thing should come on at the beginning of a shift, stay on until the end and get reviewed or something like that. And if somebody's hand goes up in front of it for any extended period of time, even during a stop, that should be a problem. So I agree. Again, I'm sorry to be in a little late. I don't know if this was discussed, but I really think we should press that because, well, I mean, that's what they're there for. So why are we turning them off to begin with?
I agree.
I want to ask a question on that, and I appreciate the comments. I know yesterday there was a press conference at the police department, which involved another case where there was no body cam footage. I know that, at least in my end, one of the earliest complaints we received, April 2019, involved a case where there was no body cam footage. And we were told, you know, there was some similar language used. The officer's going to be disciplined, they're going to be retrained, etc. And so now, however many months after that, that is 15 months or so, we're still hearing similar language. My question that I would pose to the folks, to all of you, and mostly to the folks who just commented is, what does it mean to have a mandate to have these body cameras on? For example, I think they're supposed to have them on now. And as I think of one question, more questions are popping up in my mind, but I'll just kind of put that one out there for you all. If I am to meet with these folks tomorrow, let's say, for example, and I tell them about this meeting, the police department, right? If I meet with Chief Clements tomorrow, what would you recommend that we say to them in terms of something that we can do differently to achieve a different result, right? Because clearly we're getting the same result. Not to say that they're never using the body cams, but I think we've seen too many cases where they're off, right? And so what would you say we should do differently? Or to that end, what does it mean to have a mandate, if you will?
While we're talking about reviewing, oh, go ahead, Nina, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just saying, what's the procedure? How are they reviewing this? Are they reviewing this? What is the procedure? Because, you know, when we asked the chief that the last time when we had the meeting with the police chief and the commissioner, we asked this very same question. And so I would like to see some sort of report. Like, I'm curious now because you're hearing this too often, you know. It's a lot of money is spent on those body cams. Yes, there were federal dollars that they received a grant. So they're purchasing more, I believe, with this, they're allocating more dollars in the budget this year to purchase more body cams. That's a lot of money for body cams. And if you're telling me that they're not turning it on, you have to tap, that's I don't know what to tell you.
I was going to say that one of the things that was presented to us as as a kind of pat on the back was, we instituted the use of the body cameras without a consent decree. And by saying that, it was, you should have faith in the fact that they're going to be used because we chose to do this on our own. Now, if we're going to talk about reviewing policies and things like that, they've told us that there's a, progressive discipline when it comes to this. And I forget who the lieutenant was that spoke about this, but he kept mentioning that, well, we have all these redundancies built in. Well, if you have all these redundancies built in, how come people keep not using their cameras? So is there a progressive discipline? And is that progressive discipline, hey, don't do that again. Hey, don't do that again. Hey, don't do that again. That's not progressive. That's repetitive. So I think if we're going to talk about there being, what does a mandate look like? Well, let's sit down and come up with concrete metrics on when you're supposed to use the camera, when you don't need to use it, and what the punishments will be when you don't use it. And that's pretty simple. I think that everybody understands, you know, for lack of a better term, crime and punishment, right? You're in a structure, especially a, what do you call it? What the heck is it? A paramilitary organization. So you have a rank structure, right? You have their chain of command. So again, I wouldn't expect for a line officer on the street to say, hey, Jose, you didn't turn your body camera on. That would be for your district commander or your sergeant to tell you about. Because every time when you turn it in at the end of your shift, he's looking at it and he's noticing that there's gaps in time.
Yeah, is there a why do they have the option to turn these on and off anyway? I mean, I don't know if this has been discussed, Jose, or not, but you know, I still don't understand why you can just turn it off. I don't know why there's not a need, or there's no reason to turn it off. And I think that maybe that's something we should learn about a little bit more. And just saying again, when you were talking earlier that they do get some sort of government dollars for going to buy these, but buying them just to get the money, then not using them and turning them off when you want really doesn't accomplish anything except for get you some money.
Oh, yes, I agree with you. And especially if the city is going to look to purchase more body cameras. I mean, I think it's two ways, you know, it's there to, it's just, it's there to not only protect, I think both, you know, it's for the police, but then also for the individual also. I mean, I heard the police commissioner yesterday on the news, and so the individual, the police officer that's in question, right, he forgot to turn on his body camera. So what does he get? He gets a slap? I mean, what's the repercussions on this, and how many times? I want to see some sort of data on this. Like, this is now, I don't think it should be a tap. It should be automatic, and that's, I would like you to pose that question, Jose, when you do talk to the police chief.
And
Sean, so
I'm sorry, Eugene Montero. So one of the biggest reasons why the instruments are set up where you have to engage them is storage, right? So to be able to store that amount of data for every officer that's going to be issued would be extremely expensive. So that's the premise behind having to engage it. Storage is extremely expensive. There's ways to mitigate that expense, but when you think about the number of officers with the Providence Police, I don't see how any police department can afford just, I'm on shift, I turn it on, and it stays on to the end of my shift. So that's the first thing. I think Machichi makes a really good point on if it has to be enforced, right? So if that body cam footage, or that body cam, anytime you engage with an individual or any enforcement activity, and that's in their policy, it says when you engage, you turn it on. And there's supposed to be, there are written guidelines that when you don't, including supervisory involvement, those are the things that are not happening. It's like someone made a point about doing a slap on the wrist. That's the problem. If that point is not enforced, then everything else we're talking about is a new point. So, but I just wanted to chime in about the cost. I don't know how any department would be able to afford that 100% turned on for every officer, that would be expensive for the state and for the city.
Town Clerk Sean Selleck. I think we have some of the attendees who have a few questions, and then Justice also has a question.
I think that's meant to wait until later on in the meeting, so I'll
Okay.
defer to the chair for now.
Just wanted to acknowledge it. I just didn't know.
One more thing I want to speak to about with like storage capacity and all that stuff. I can imagine that there would be pushback from the union to have the cameras on for the entirety of a person's shift. There would be questions about what do you call it, personal conversations and invasion of privacy and all that stuff. Even though when you're on duty, you're technically on the city's dime, but you do have a right to your sovereignty to where you can have a perfect personal conversation with your partner. It promotes unit cohesion and that kind of camaraderie and everything else. So I can imagine that there would be pushback against that. But again, if you're doing something that's involved in an enforcement activity, then there shouldn't be any reason why it's not on. And there shouldn't be any reason why if you shut it off or it doesn't come on, there shouldn't be some sort of punishment involved.
It's in the policy, but one of the problems they encountered when they first got them, where they were turning on based on automatically turning on, and there were a number of people, male and female, that were going to the bathroom, and their body cameras were on while they were in a restroom, especially for males that are in the restroom with other, not in a stall. And that was one of the reasons why they had to change the operation of the body camera to, I'm not sure exactly how making it so that they have to turn it on rather than automatically coming on when they get out of the car.
But I feel like this, if your report doesn't mesh with your body cam,
Absolutely.
or your body cam didn't come on, then that's where we run into a problem, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's within the policy of when they're supposed to turn it on, when it can be off based on interviewing a witness that maybe you need confidentiality, something
Right.
like that. But it's in the, I was just reviewing the policy.
Okay.
It's in the policy of when it should come on and when it shouldn't. And it basically states whenever there's an enforcement action.
Thank you,
Can
Susan.
we have a copy of that? I'm just curious.
It's online. The body worn camera is online. If you just Google Providence Police Policy and Procedure, it's online.
Okay.
It's a public document.
Susan?
Okay, thanks. Just want to change the topic just a little bit. I know, Jose and Eugene, you met with the Attorney General. So today he issued the protocols for the review of incidents involving the use of deadly force, excessive force, and custodial deaths. So I'm just curious as to how this is going to impact our investigations. Is it going to be a collaborative effort, or is it going to be an impediment to doing what we need to do? What's your feelings?
Eugene, I'd like to hear what you think. I'll just say, I'll try to make my answer really, really simple.
Okay.
I think we did bring that up with the Attorney General. I think the simple thing that is likely to happen is that we can be notified of every case that is referred to the Attorney General. I think that's pretty simple to do, according to the conversation we had today. What is harder to do is to determine to what extent parents should be involved for similar reasons. Like the IAB is saying the same thing, right? And investigations are delicate things. And for example, in the Sergeant Hanley case, the concern is that if para or any organization would be involved, will that criminal case become compromised such that information becomes available, or Sergeant Hanley's rights are violated in some way, and then the criminal case is gone. And so that's what they're guarding against. So that's my really short, simple answer. Eugene, what do you think?
No, mine is pretty much the same. I think that the good part is because, as we know, these types of issues are not isolated to Providence. And sadly, Providence is the only city that has this oversight committee. So on that note, that it provides opportunity for where it eliminates that opportunity for departments to be able to take care of it in-house. Because if something that should be prosecuted, at least from the conversation we had today, I have the feeling that's the goal. And so that's my one side. On the other side, how it may affect our involvement in Providence, that's still unknown. And I think there's a little bit more conversation that we needed to have with the Attorney General, because there are things that we're involved with that he would never be involved. So I
Right.
think there's some more detailed conversation.
So let me
just-
say this.
No, go ahead. I'm
Sorry.
sorry. Hold on. Go
Tiffany,
ahead.
Who's this? Oh, hi, Nick. So I am on the Attorney General's Advisory Board. He does want to have a meeting. I did invite him to a future para board meeting. These are some of the conversations I think we should have with him. If we do have conversations, he does want to work with us. I know he has not gotten that far with talking about this. We are the only police oversight board in Rhode Island. So if you have questions, I think it would be nice to have him on. I think he should be on and to meet with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, thank you.
Well-
Yes, Michael, you had a
No,
comment?
yes, I did. And again, with that understanding, that's fine. I just had a little bit of a concern that we'd be circumvented. And I think that, again, having been a prosecutor who worked in an office, there is a kind of sometimes a very close relationship between that department and other police departments. And I understand we would not have any ability or authority to look at anyone outside of Providence, but it just gave me a little bit of a pause that something could wrap, like we don't get, brought in on anything. And then we're finding that things are dismissed that, maybe they shouldn't have been, or they're not acted upon with the full legal weight that they could have because of other prior existing relationships. And I just think that's something that we should be mindful of. So if, Peter wants to come down and talk to the board, then that'll be great, but that's just my concern. That's all.
All right, thank you, Michael. All right, so just want to let you all know that I have to step off this call around 6:30, 6:40. Have a school board meeting that I need to attend. I may be able to hop back on depending on how quickly that goes. This has been a really great discussion, and I think if you all are amenable to it, members of the board, I'd love to hear from a few members of the community because I think this is a very important discussion that they should be involved in. So, Sean, is that something we can do? Do we have to amend the meeting or?
Well, tonight's a little bit special because Jose has thoughtfully put item number 3 on the agenda today, which is kind of a free-for-all. So you really have left, you have allowed legally for a discussion for anything under the sun that the board might want to consider in the future. And so if people would like to do that, and if Machiste, as sitting in the chair, would like to allow people to have those conversations under item number 3, then whoever the chair is at that moment is more than welcome to do so.
Do I need to move for, do I need to make a motion for that to take place, to be seconded?
Not tonight. I mean, if we wrap up the discussion for item number 2, then we'll go into item number 3, and you're really allowed to open it up to the public however you like.
Okay, so let's go into item number 3. And from here, we can manage that open discussion. Okay, so members of the public, if you wish to say a few words, have any questions, this is the time to do it.
Hi, everyone.
I'll just guide, I think maybe if Jose wants to guide this, I know that Jose already has recognized a number of people, including Mr. Kumba, who had announced their interest in speaking ahead of the meeting.
Sure.
And then it would be up to the chair if they want to entertain allowing others who may have their hands raised. Again, I just want to caution you, anyone who's aware of what happened last week. Anonymity is the enemy of democracy here, and so if you recognize names of people who want to speak and would like me to unmute them, then I will do so, because I do recognize some of the names of the people from our community that are attendees at this moment, and you could let them speak. If there are people that you don't recognize, I would caution you against unmuting them unless they can reach out to Jose in the next few minutes, via their social media or email to let him know who they are and that they would like to speak.
Okay, thank you, Sean. So with that, Jose, I'll turn it over to you. Item number 3, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, no, I did, well, let me just say this. I did see one question, one specific question posted in my Twitter, but I will hold on to that question for a moment, and I want to honor the presence of 2 folks who did follow up to our request and reached out to us and gave us their email address. So I know Justice and Mr. Kumba, if we can start with you folks, and if you have questions or thoughts, and I will certainly ask the question that's here. And I see at least 3 hands. It'd be ideal if we can get to all of the above. So Mr. Kumba, would you like to begin?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invite, and glad to be here in this meeting. I'm appreciate that I'm able to go first. I'm just like the the other gentleman, the chairman, Mr. Figueroa. I'm gonna have to jump back off because I'm in the middle of a class right now. So my name is Vadik Tayari Kuumba. I'm an artist, activist. Actually do a lot of work with different groups in the city. So I'm part of the Environmental Sustainability Task Force. I'm also part of the Racial Environmental Justice Committee, as well as doing work right now with Creative Community Health Workers, which is a group of facilitators who will be doing residencies throughout the city. And I just want to talk about this and the work that we do is really about nurturing the community and nurturing the different needs and working collaboratively with community to solve them. So, I don't really want to rehash all of the history, but I do think that that's a great anti-racist tool to understand history. And so folks that, have an understanding of policing and the history of that, understand that policing really comes, I heard it said here, it's a paramilitary force that's really based around violence. As an artist, I do look at symbols and they're very strong to me. So I look at the emblem of the Providence Police Force and it's like a hand holding a sword, and in this moment, we don't need swords. We don't need 400 plus swords going around in our community to make us safer. We're dealing with layers of pandemic right now. And I think about the tools that we have for our officers and the tools that are on their belt or in their cars, and those tools are all structured around violence. And I think that we need to we need to push ourselves to imagine beyond what could be for a force that would be for actual public safety and for public healing. So I think that, us having the conversation around defunding and reallocating funds to different community either community organizations, which would be interesting to have like it be run by community or by other city departments that have resources that are available to the community. So with Councilwoman Rachel Miller, we just had a fantastic meeting on Monday with community where we did a exercise around collaborative budgeting, and folks were able to look at the budget and really examine different pieces that they would cut, and then imagining where they would be putting the money. And so we, like you, didn't have all the numbers. We didn't have all of the things because we didn't get it from the police department. But I do think we have an idea that people are really interested. We had, I think, like 75 people, 80 people show up to that meeting. We're planning to do some other ones throughout the city. I'd like to invite folks from this group, from this panel, to be present and maybe even speak on history of para and the trials that have come with that and those different type of things. But yeah, I just wanted to like share off the top, just kind of like share some of the feelings and the interest in this conversation. So I appreciate you all allowing us to start this conversation. Also, I just want to say that, the police department, the Providence Police Department, is over 150 years old, right? And so we're not going to solve this in one fiscal year. We're not going to solve it over the course of a 3-hour meeting, right? So I appreciate us beginning this relationship and beginning this conversation and involving the public in a authentic way in doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Justice?
Hello, it's nice to see all of you. thank you for having me, and I want to thank Vatic for setting up the really, really important conversation, right, about what does change look like for Providence and for the country right now when it comes to policing. And I really, really think it's important that within the context of para, we uplift defunding the police, and we uplift the fact that a lot of folks in Providence are asking for that right now. And the city council itself has gotten thousands of emails around this issue of defunding the police and how para might be able to support that goal. And so I want to address some of the conversation and some of the recommendations that have been happening with para and that have come out of para. Because I think what's really important is that when we say defund the police, there has to be a community-driven, community-centered process to decide exactly like how that money goes back into the community. But I think it's also extremely crucial that we recognize that that goal, that slogan, that framing that's been promulgated over the last few weeks especially is not new, and it's been something that's been developed for the last 30 years. It's been something that communities have been looking at and pushing for decades now. And I think it's crucial that we also understand part of the purpose of defund the police is not to make a better police system. It is to make a system that actually supports communities from the ground up without policing, without the structure of racist policing that has been developed in our country, right? It recognizes that policing is a legacy and a current iteration of slavery, right? Building a mass incarceration system that is a 13th Amendment exception to slavery. I need everyone on the call to understand that, right? Like, that is what we're talking about. We're not necessarily talking about what reforms will make the police better. And the reason we're no longer talking about what make the police better is because we know that they don't make police better, right? I've looked at the trainings, and I brought the trainings to you all last year, right? That we know that those trainings haven't necessarily stopped someone like Terrell Patchy getting racially profiled in Providence, right? We know that the body cams are a flawed system because we can't have them recording everything all the time. And frankly, all of the conversation about body cams, yes, they need to be more accountable, but I'm tired of watching my people die on camera. A body cam did not save the life of George Floyd. Cameras did not save the life of Alton Sterling. Cameras did not save the life of Philando Castile. Cameras did not save the life of Sandra Bland. Cameras capturing our violence against us does not save our lives. And so when we're talking about what it means to change policing in Providence, when we're talking about what safety looks like in Providence, what community safety looks like in Providence, we need to start turning this conversation around from how do we make the police better and start divesting funds from a failed system. And frankly, I only say failed because it's hurting us, but this is what the system was designed to do. We're not going to reform a system to change its purpose, right? A light is supposed to turn on. If you screw a rock into it, that's not how it works, right? The police are meant to do what they are doing, and that's why we saw that Black people are disproportionately stopped in every district in the city. It is why this report that you all had commissioned showed that people of color tend to be stopped for minor violations way more than white folks in Providence, right? And so this is something that's not separate from Providence. And I think it's very important that we recognize that. And if para is going to have a role in this, if para is going to have any funds reallocated to it, right? Because even reallocating funds towards para is still reallocating funds back into an investment into this policing system, right? If any of these funds are coming directly from the police budget to the Providence External Review Authority, they need to come directly out of the Office of Professional Responsibility or the Internal Affairs Bureau's budget, right? And that department, if it's not doing its job, if it's not coordinating with you, if it's not cooperating, if it's not actually pursuing complaints the way it's supposed to be pursuing them, it doesn't need to exist in Providence. We can funnel that power back into para, and then para will need concrete power, not only to subpoena, but also to have punitive measures taken against officers who commit misconduct, right? We need to have, if para is going to get that money, it needs to have actual teeth, and we do not need the Office of Professional Relations, professional, yeah. We don't need the Internal Affairs Bureau, because the idea is not here to keep investing in police. The idea is actually to create alternate systems, right? The idea is to build up new systems that will keep us safe, because we have seen that police only keep certain members of our community safe. I also think it's very, very important that para recognizes the full function of its power, then asks for more power in that regard, right? Para right now, by the Community Safety Act, does have the power to review police contracts, and that's something that we need to see more often. It does have the power to call public hearings on police policies, and that's something we need to see more often. And also, when it comes to the recommendation around reforming the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights in Rhode Island must be repealed. There is no reform to the Bill of Rights in its current state that will allow us to hold police officers accountable. And we heard it on, at the city council meeting last week, we heard our commissioner state that if George Floyd was killed on camera the way he had in Minneapolis, in Providence, we would not be able to fire that police officer. We would not be able to take any immediate action towards that officer, except maybe a 2-day suspension. So the Police Officer Bill of Rights, the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, needs to be repealed. And I would ask that para stand behind the fact that we're not going to change that bill to make it better. If a new bill needs to happen, it can happen after this one is repealed, when we have a much clearer understanding of exactly what damage that bill has done to citizens and civilians in Rhode Island. And so I'm asking you all, as a civilian-based body, to be more forceful and to be more clear about what it means for us as a community to start reinvesting resources in housing, in education, in healthcare, in jobs for communities of color, and take that money away from police that have proven to be a force that we constantly have to hold accountable because it does not know how to function without accountability. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Justice, for that. I'm actually, if Sean, if we could let the record show that I am stepping off the meeting, Vice Chair Machisti Rankin will be taking over from this point.
Surprise.
So noted.
Moving on.
There's a different sheriff in town, although maybe that may not be the best reference to make. Right
Probably now. a bad transition. I have the con. How's that?
There you go. Next.
It seems like there are some, Mr. Vice Chair, it seems like there's some folks in the public who have their hand raised, or Elise.
Elise, the chair recognizes Elise.
Sure. Hi. So Ray Watson, which is one of the community members, had texted me some of his questions. He had to jump off for 6:30 as well. So I just wanted to read them. They're just questions he would like pose to the Providence Police Department that we could ask from para to the police department. So I'll read them aloud. Has any research been done into the process by which officers are promoted? Is it primarily based on arrests? Is it community feedback accounted for? And if so, to what extent? Number 2 is, how are the police departments getting rid of the bad apples? In particular, why is the PPD retraining officers that aren't meeting the professional standard rather than removing them or hiring more professional officers? And 3, has any discussion been had extending the initial training processes to perhaps a year so that more professional atmosphere for officers coming into the PPD is available? And number 4, he's going to recommend, he sits on the Providence Human Relations Commission now. He's the chair of that, which is a Providence City commission. And so he's officially going to ask the city to endorse the recommendations made by para, and he's going to make that ask to the mayor and city council as well on behalf of PHRC. So thank you, Machista. I just wanted to have that be public.
You're welcome. Are there any other individuals who are away from their cameras or away from their laptops, that we have questions that we can field for them? Are there any members of the audience that need to be recognized that want to ask a question?
Yeah, looks like there's some folks with their hands up.
Why don't we take them in the order that they raised their hand, rather, sorry.
I think it's Shauna was first.
Shauna was first, yes.
Okay, let's hear from Shauna.
Okay. And so I assume that you're recognizing that name?
Yes, I am. Isn't that
Okay.
Shauna that's connected with Prism?
I'm going to promote her to a panelist. And Shauna, if you're able to unmute yourself and are ready to speak, you have the floor as the chair has recognized you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I won't take it personally that the chair left right before I spoke. I have to say I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated at this. There have been so many moments of hope in the last few weeks, particularly seeing the young people take the streets, seeing the young people express their anger and their pain so powerfully. But this meeting doesn't feel like it's one of those moments of hope. And maybe it's just expecting too much because we have created PARA and kind of brought it back to life as a city institution. So I understand, I recognize there's limits on it. But I think what I'm hearing is sort of an approach that's sort of geared toward PARA sort of shadowing the police department, and Justice described it really aptly with this idea that, that PARA really is so integrated then that it becomes part of this policing monster that's destroying, ravaging our communities. So I want to point out some of the places where I saw that happening and where I'm kind of concerned, and maybe some ideas for how you all can go more on the attack, whether you want to call it your own swords, pens, voices, or whatever, but actually be a force for good, for justice, for lives, for community safety. So the first thing is just in talking about sort of at the beginning, Jose, when you talked about sort of the activities, this whole publicity and outreach was sort of mentioned as an afterthought almost. It hasn't really gotten any attention. I know there's been so much work you all have had to devote to building the infrastructure, to getting the mechanics of the complaint process set up. So I don't want to downplay that. But ultimately, like, you go to any 10 people in the community and say, what's PARA? And they're going to say, I don't know. People, it's the Spanish word for pear, it's not out there. So, and, social media is great. It's helpful, but, like bus ads, get on the radio, go to, get board members out to community festivals and fairs, do door knocking, go out on the streets in groups, handing out PARA leaflets. When you're thinking about where more money would go, I know there's different ideas around, policy folks that you've mentioned in previous meetings, but there needs to be outreach. The thing is, if you sort of boil it down to sort of who comes to you, I mean, out of those 19 complaints, I don't know, we probably maybe 4 of them or something. It's, have a block party, but something to get the word out for people to know it's there. Right now, the number of complaints that the police get actually that don't come to OPR, and that's when, people know that's the official place, is so small, partly because they discourage it, right? And they'll get the numbers down, I forgot which year, maybe 2015, from 200 calls, and they whittle it down to 75 actual complaints, because they're successfully discouraging people from following through. So those numbers are small to begin with because people don't trust that process. So not that it's a bad thing to want to have access to tracking their complaints, that doesn't hurt, but that can't be it. If there's not PARA as this like wild alternative where people could actually feel some sense that they're going to get justice, that they're going to know about it and how it works, then it won't matter how well you sit on the police and internal affairs or Office of Professional Responsibility complaint process, because that's just so small and warped and skewed with all the people that have been discouraged. So in terms of that, thinking about some of the some of the tools. So being more aggressive about recruiting and creating the opportunity, the platform for people to complain. I know there was there's been talk that people can only go back 1 year to file a complaint. And Jose, I know when I mentioned that to you, questioned that, and you said you thought it was in the statute. I've gone back and checked, and I admit, when you've read something a bunch of times, you don't always read it carefully. I can't find anything in that statute that creates a 1 year limit. So, granted, investigation's harder if you have to go farther back in time. So it's not ideal, but at least letting people have that option, that could help, that could help you get more of a historical read on some of the things that have been happening. Let's see, okay, I'm going to touch on body cams quickly. And this is sort of a bigger, this idea that I think a few people have said it so far, that there are certain things, they're required to do certain stuff already. Right, the policy is up there, and a tool for your members. Susan asked about how to find it. I'd say give your folks, all the board members, give everybody the link to that section. Like Ken mentioned, it's right there, the section that has all the policies listed, and just skim them. I mean, the topics, it's amazing. It's procedures in cell block, it's use of the gym, it's lethal force, less lethal force, accidents in your vehicle, and there's body cams. So there's a rich pile of stuff there, and it goes through, for instance, when they're required to turn them on and off, what constitutes a stop. And again, a lot of that comes out of the CSA, but that's all spelled out in there. And again, it comes back to they don't get punished. I mean, we've had so many complaints, folks who've been in, dealing with the criminal system are familiar with the amount, how common it is that they don't choose to or remember to turn them on at the key moments. And I think it's quite possible there's some confusion, but I think it's also self-serving a lot of times. The machines, the cameras themselves, remember this, and this is part of why it's such a faulty solution. Those cameras are made by Taser. They changed their name, but whatever. It's Taser International is the name of the company that makes the body cams. And guess what else they make? Yeah, tasers. So these are companies that are really invested in good relationships with the local police departments that buy their stuff. They set them up with their nice free taste, like any good, anybody who's pushing some kind of substance would do. They get their free taste. They get the pot here. We'll even help you finance it with these federal grants. Then you're on the hook for paying for the service because Taser owns all that video that we've identified could get really expensive. But there is no way then that Taser is going to manufacture a camera that the officer loses control for on and off. It will always be the officer has the ability to turn it on and off themselves because that's the way the cameras are manufactured. But there's little stuff that the police department could do if they wanted to. You may have seen on Mr. Pachi's video, it goes back 30 seconds from the moment you turn it on. It has only video and no sound. But all they have to do, that's just a default setting. They could set it so that when it goes back 30 seconds, it captures the sound too. They just don't want to do that because they know that could be a very damaging part of what gets recorded is that initial confrontation. And that could reveal a lot. So there are things the department can do. And, as much as I think we have righteous anger at the FOP, particularly under its current leadership, it's also, I heard Councilwoman Harris said once, they're doing their job. They're protecting their members. That's their job. And so what happens is there's this tendency to let the administration off the hook. Same way, school department, you complain about a teacher, the principal will just blame the teachers union. Like that's the only problem there. But in this case, yes, get rid of law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights. It's awful. It's damaging. But in the meantime, I think Commissioner Perry can't sit there and pretend to just smile and like kumbaya with everybody because he's not even trying to fire the worst officers. You've got Matthew Sheridan, 4 lawsuits based on his first 2 years or less of service on the force. They've made no effort to fire him. So the administration, even under the current regime, statutory regime, could be doing a whole lot more to fire people. And, you know, becoming more activist, more make that happen. You know, I don't think it's realistic to count on the AGs to do it. You know, Mr. Fontaine identified very clearly what I think is a real truth. You know, you've seen it when you go into court. What the AGs are about is prosecuting people. They are about putting people in jail. They're part of that. The police are part of, I mean, there's case law that calls it this. They're part of the prosecution team. They are partners. They are so reluctant to punish any of them. It's only when there's great pressure that they even do it, or when there's a publicity opportunity for them. So like this bill that they came out with the other day, that's not, I mean, that means trusting them to go after police officers. Oh, here's a bunch of new tools. Make sure you use them on the police officers. I just don't think that that's a very likely scenario, honestly. So, you know, it's good to, you know what they're up to. Communication's great.
Shanna? Shanna?
Please don't trust them to sort of support and help and advance the mayor. Donna, yes?
No, I wanted to say, I know,
Oh,
I know
is my
that you,
internet bad?
no, you've been breaking up, but I wanted to say, I know you always have strong feelings. You always bring a lot to the conversation. I just want to be mindful that there's other people that want to talk. So if you can like come back on after or something, but I know you always bring a lot of value to the conversation, but I want to give other people a chance to talk to.
Yep, that's fine. Okay, I'll wrap up then. Yeah, so basically, I mean, the bottom line is, even with this thing of them being resistant to handing over material, the law says they have to just go in there with children who don't want to behave. That's how it's got to be approached. And finally, in terms of amendments to the CSA, the community didn't care about the name of it. We're going to call it what we're going to call it. Please don't use political capital on renaming it, because nobody cares. It was us that suggested getting rid of the name. It's not something that really matters, makes a difference. It's what's going to be. That's just a tool. We use it how we use it. So that's really. Oh yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much, Shanna. Who else do we have in the bullpen?
You have Vanessa Flores Maldonado next, if you'd like.
The chair will recognize Vanessa.
Coming over.
Wait, hold on 1 second. Hi.
Good evening.
Hi everyone. Yeah, sorry, I'm tired. I'm exhausted, and I feel like I'm just, I don't know if this is like a nightmare I'm reliving or something, but I feel like we've had this conversation over and over again. And so, yeah, I mean, the community never even asked for body cams. It was never a demand that we had. We didn't care about body cams because we knew that even if we had body cams, we would mysteriously turn off, so not to like the dead horse or whatever the saying is, but yeah, body cams are not going to save us. What is going to save us is abolishing the police, and we have to recognize that defund the police is about abolishing the police. At the end of the day, our youth have this energy and this drive and passion, and we cannot ignore it. And as an adult, I'm not going to tell them no. We have to reform first. And so, and I'm not speaking as the community, right? That's not fair either to me or to the community. I'm speaking as Vanessa, who has been in these meetings nonstop and has just been kind of zapped by them, to be honest, because I feel like y'all need to be taking stronger approaches to this. It's not just reform anymore, it's abolish. That's the movement that the youth are about right now. And you know what? We need to get behind that or get out of their way, because they're doing it. They're really doing it. And so the fact that we're having this conversation right now is a testament to that. And so one thing that I really want to say is that trainings are not going to be enough ever. Change of policy, reform, none of that is gonna really be able to change what is true, is that the policing system in America was not meant for people of color, for Black folks especially. We've seen this nonstop. And so I don't want to talk anymore about reform. I want to talk about abolish, because I think, you know, if the police department is going to have an $88 million budget to terrorize a community, that's not it. We cannot allow that to happen. The police department is like 450 officers, which is way, way above national average for cities of the same size. And I have data to back it up, and I can give it to you, of course. So, you know, right now, I'm just asking for there to be an elimination of jobs in the police department, because clearly some people cannot do their jobs. And it's wild to me that you can have police officers like Matthew Sheridan still be on the force, who have a history of police abuse, and still be there. And you can have countless testimony of community over and over again, and still you don't see much progress being done, right? The Community Safety Act was powerful for what it was for its time 5 years ago, 3 years ago when we passed it. That was powerful 3 years ago. But right now, we're moving beyond the CSA. We're evolving beyond that. We're no longer talking about creating new policies and creating new committees. We need to see an elimination of this budget and an end of SROs in our schools, because that's something that also needs to be said. I don't want more police officers on the street. I want 8 police officers off the force, because we don't need more police officers. We don't need more training or a new academy. We don't need there to be more guns and ammunition. We didn't even want the horses. So why are we paying over $1 million for horses? You know, this is never anything that the community wanted. And so right now, what our youth are saying, the youth that I work with, and I'm so blessed to be in movement, and the community members who I've been speaking to, we're beyond reform. We're beyond, you know, maybe taking a little bit of money away. We want it all. That $88 million belongs to the community. And so we're going to fight until we get that money back, and until we see the abolishment of the police departments, not just here in Providence, but across the country. And so, like Vadik said, this isn't happening overnight, right? We got to make sure that we're protecting ourselves, we're protecting our communities, and we're setting up infrastructure for that. Para has the possibility to help us shape that. And so I'm going to urge y'all, fight harder, be meaner. Y'all seen how mean and rude I can get. You've experienced it. And so now just embrace your inner Vanessa and let her out, because Jesus fucking Christ, I'm sorry. Jesus Christ, I am tired.
That's one.
I'm sorry. I will give a quarter to the quarter jar. I'm doing better. See, I'm still swearing. I'm swearing less though.
Yes.
So that's all.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, next you have Tal. Would you like to let that person speak?
Who?
Tal. I don't know if anyone recognizes that name. If not, we can move on to, looks like Councilor Miller.
Chair will recognize Councilor Miller.
Hey everyone, thank you for letting me join. And I can actually vouch for Tal, who is also, it sounds like, in the queue. But I would just say, I want to thank everyone for your service on Para. I think you know that you play a vital role, especially right now. And I just want to say, as a member of the council, we need a strong, independent force fighting on behalf of our residents. And so if we need to look at expanding independent investigatory powers of Para, I am all for that. And I think we should build that support for those measures on the council. I think that we know, based even just on the testimony we just heard from some community members, that there are officers on the force right now who should not be working for the Providence police. That there are people who have been abusing their power, multiple times. We need a voice like Para to take on that fight. And I guarantee that, you know, I will support that effort if we need to look at the ordinance that sets the boundaries of Para. I would support that effort. I would lift it up, and I would be happy to stand with you. So I really just wanted to thank y'all for your service here.
Thank you, Councilor Miller.
Okay, Chair, would you like to hear from Tal?
Sure, let's hear from Tal. Chair recognizes Tal.
Tal, you're being promoted to a panelist, and you may unmute yourself and speak when you're ready.
Hi, thank you so much for hearing me, and sorry for the confusion. I appreciate it. I just wanted to really briefly support what all the panelists have said before me, which is that this is a moment to ask for much more than reform. It's a moment to ask for abolition. It's a moment to ask for fully defunding the police. This is politically possible now. We're seeing thousands of people from Providence go out into the streets every weekend to support these demands. We're seeing thousands of emails being sent to City Council. And Para, to my understanding, has the ability to recommend budget recommendations to the City Council regarding the police budget. And I would just say that as a community member, having seen that all of the energy flowing out in terms of defunding the police, I would argue that Para should be asking for the full defunding and abolition of the Providence Police Department. And I know that that sounds unreasonable or unrealistic, but I would encourage the members of Para both to continue looking into the data that shows us that reforms like body cams, use of force policies, de-escalation policies, they actually don't really prevent police violence, because Louisville had a ban on no-knock warrants when Breonna Taylor was murdered. New York City had a ban on chokeholds when Eric Garner was murdered. There's so many examples of when police break the rules. It's not about making better rules for the police. It's about getting rid of the police. And that is why thousands of people are out in the streets every weekend. I would also ask you to look at alternatives to community safety that don't involve the police. We have Cahoots in Oregon, where first responder teams are sent out to address mental health crises and substance use crises. In LA, just recently, the city council announced that the police would no longer be responding to most 911 calls. Similarly, Minneapolis has, the city council voted to disband the police department. This is something that we can do here in Providence. I would encourage all of you to look at the resources at 8toabolition.com and other abolitionist texts to look at examples for how to deal with harm in the community without the police. And actually, I just want to close because I know there are other people on the queue and I don't want to take up too much space. But at the city council meeting last week, the police department actually gave us the data on why we should get rid of the police. They said themselves over 150,000 calls to the police every year, and most of them don't require an armed police officer. In fact, they didn't fire any shots last year, meaning that they don't need their guns and we don't need police responding to these calls. They said that over the past couple of years, the number of police officers has gone down and simultaneously crime has gone down. We know that we don't need an armed police force running around town and discriminately targeting people of color and Black people in particular. So I would encourage the Para Board to use its power to advocate for the full defunding and abolition of the Providence Police Force and the investment in community resources, as has been said before me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Tal. The board will recognize one more speaker from the community, and then we will move to go to executive. I will move to go to executive session. Who do we have up next that wants to speak? And that will be the last speaker before we go to executive session.
I actually don't see anyone else in the queue, so if you wanted to see if there was anybody else that was already a panelist that wanted to add any closing comments, you could. Otherwise, we could entertain a motion to move on to item 4 and go into executive session.
So noted. Let's move on.
Maybe I'll just have the stenographic reporter read the item. Do you have that handy, Jen, or would you like me to read that?
Yep. Discussion and vote regarding formal complaints received by para. The para will go into executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 4246-4 and Rhode Island General Laws 4246-5, A1 and A4.
Do I have a motion to move to executive session?
So moved.
So moved.
Seconded.
Seconded.
Chair, would you mind repeating who the mover and the second was for the benefit of the stenographic reporter?
I believe it was Miss Susan Dorita.
Yep.
Second was, is that Mr. Montero?
No, that was Mr. Dorita, seconded. I believe Mr. Fontaine.
Yes, I moved.
Yes, he moved, and Mr. Rita seconded.
Call for a vote.
Vote.
Aye.
Aye.
All the ayes.
Aye.
Nays.
Aye.
Abstain. Ayes have it. You shall move to executive session.
Okay, thank you. We'll be moving to executive session now. And so I'd ask any of the guests, if they want to hang around until we complete the executive session to report out the results that took place during the executive session, you're welcome to do that.
Sean,
Yes.
I didn't get the information to go into the executive session meeting.
Okay. All right. Who is that?
It's Jill.
Oh, Jill. Okay, Jillian. Okay, I will send that right over to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Angela, are you able to share your screen? Thank you. All right, Angela, I'll be making you the host. Jen, I will see you and the others in the executive session, and we'll see you all back here after the executive session has completed.
Girl. How you doing, Angela? I'm good. I miss you. I read your lips. Oh man, people are coming. I'm sorry. Kim, I want to stand up so badly, but I'm wearing pajama pants. Wildly inappropriate. If I was just like, hey guys, I'm
Angela, I'll ask you to, if you could lower the unshare your screen and then make me the host again, please.
This is about my 5th time standing in these.
Sean, Machiste is having some sort of issue and he needs you to send him the invite again.
Okay.
We can teach him how email works next time.
Okay, I have
Stop. Come on. What is that?
I've resent him the
He's here.
Oh, there he is.
Where is Jose?
Okay, we're back in.
We can't hear you. Machiste, you're on mute.
Jose said he was going to have to exit because he had to go and take care of some other stuff. I'm sorry, what'd you say, Sean?
Oh, no. So then if you could just ask to entertain a motion to end the executive session, return to regular session.
Can we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then after that vote is taken, then you'll ask for a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
Okay. Can we have a motion, can we have a motion to exit executive session and return to the normal session?
Second.
So moved.
Can you repeat, who made the motion and who seconded?
It was Susan. I think Elise seconded.
Sure.
No, Mike seconded.
Mike seconded.
Okay.
And not in that order, though.
Right. And I'll also put forward a motion to seal the.
We're We just need to do a roll call. One at a
Oh, sorry.
do a roll call first.
Yes. A roll call, please.
Chairman Figueroa is absent. Mr. Rankin, Vice Chairman Rankin, rather.
Present.
Miss Falibele,
Present.
Mr. Cohen. Mr. Cohen is absent. Mr. Rita,
Present.
Miss Di,
It's actually pronounced D, but here.
Miss D, sorry about that.
It's all right.
Mr. Fontaine,
Present.
Miss Swearingen,
Present.
Miss Ray.
Present.
So you have 7 present and 2 absent. You are out of the executive session.
Okay. Mr. Chair, would you like to entertain a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
I would like to entertain a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
Second.
Who was the mover? The seconder was Ms. Ray.
Panita, Tripoli.
Thank you. You can just ask for a voice vote, Chair, just all in favor.
All in favor of voice vote?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? The ayes have it. Okay, I believe that we've covered all the business that was important for the evening. I'm going to put forward a motion to end the regular session and call the meeting to adjourn it.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Oh, sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? No. Abstain? The ayes have it. Motion to adjourn is passed.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Kimberly D.
Good night.